High-stakes talks are underway in Banff, Alberta, where those managing the world's largest economies are meeting today. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne is hosting his G7 counterparts, including U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Thank you. It's great to have you. Welcome. Nice to see you. Welcome, sir.
That's Minister Champagne alongside Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem, welcoming Secretary Bessent and U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell this morning. Champagne has said all G7 officials are eager to sit down with Bessent as U.S. President Donald Trump threatens the economies of many of those nations. These 3 days of talks set the table for the far more significant G7 Summit of World Leaders. It's taking place next month. Champagne and Bessent are expected to hold separate meetings on the sidelines tonight, and tariffs could create a pretty tense environment there. So it's time to bring in the power panel. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communications strategist and co-host of the Beyond a Ballot podcast. Tim Powers is a former strategist for Conservative parties. Jordan Likeness is a former NDP strategist, and Sherelle Evelyn is the managing editor of the Hill Times. Hello to you all. It's nice to see you. Thanks for doing this.
You're better looking than the other host, by the way.
You would say that, wouldn't you?
I know. We want to build you up.
Well, then I'm going to start with you because you're so nice. I'm sort of really focused on the G7 finance ministers and central bankers, if only because I report on that stuff most of the time. What is at stake here? These are supposed to just be kind of pro forma meetings. Tim, do you think there's the stakes have heightened as a result of the trade tensions and trade wars?
Well, most certainly they have, but if I'm Scott Bessent, I have a search and rescue posse on hand because there's been so many pull-asides, I suspect he's subject to, he may go missing in the woods. Everybody wants their word with him because they believe, Peter, that he has influence with the president and that he'll be able to best represent their individual interests first to the president and then...
and he seems to have won the sort of the battle among trade advisors, right? Navarro, yep. Lutnick, Kevin, whatever his name is. But the four of them, Bessent seems to have clearly won the battle. So at least at the G7 meeting, you've got the right guy there.
You have the right guy there, but I think as we continue to see, you can have all of the right guys and the right women there, and Donald Trump will decide what Donald Trump's going to do. But you can't not but try. I mean, right. I think all of these countries, all of the other G6 minus the United States, are very worried about recession. You cover this. TD came out today and said, you know what, could be in one very shortly, could last a little while. And I think they're trying to press upon Bessent and in turn the president that, hey, a lot of the reason why we could be heading in that direction is uncertainty and uncertainty around tariffs. You need to do something because you won't win in that circumstance.
Jordan's Kevin Hassett is the name I forgot. Just they put it in my ear because they're helpful. The uncertainty isn't just bad for Canada, it's bad for the U.S. Is that sort of the line in to Bessent to say, look at what the bond market's doing, look at what equity markets are doing, look at what's happening to trade numbers in the United States?
Yeah, I think it's certainly a fruitful one. We've seen that Trump has some susceptibility to that type of domestic pressure around U.S. markets. That's where we've seen some movement with him on the tariffs before. So I think the Canadians and frankly the other allies within the G7 underlining that is going to be helpful. And look, I think all eyes are going to be on what kind of a communique is able to come out of this meeting. And of course, the tariffs aren't even the only potentially contentious issue that's not on the agenda but is overshadowing the agenda. Right. There's also Ukraine. Ukraine is present at this meeting as well. And right in the midst of sort of failed negotiations that Trump is leading between Russia and Ukraine on that conflict and really wavering confidence that the U.S. is backing Ukraine in any sort of sustained way. So that's another layer that's over top of what is on the official agenda.
Amanda, I'll go to you on that, because I think the fact that Ukraine is there speaks, at least in part, to how different the world was when these meetings were being planned to what they are today. There's no way we'd be having a Ukrainian delegation at a meeting today if this was planned in the last 3 months. How much has the structure of these meetings changed as a result of the trade wars that cropped up since it started the planning?
So much. I think almost everything has changed as the global uncertainty continues to dominate. The fact that Ukraine's finance minister is part of G7 meetings when they're not part of the G7 is a remarkable shift. And I think in the context of all of these, so there's the Ukraine issue, there's obviously the trade issue. We saw the Treasury Secretary's office really positioning or framing perhaps their position heading into this meeting, reiterating their kind of now tired rhetoric about the global imbalances. So we know, their stance coming into it. But then we have all of these countries who are looking to reestablish or reconsider their trade relationship with the US and with each other. New trading partners, new relationships, and Ukraine at the table, of course, because it will be one of the priorities of the G7, that and things like AI and cybersecurity. These are all issues that are being handled. But I would say, and certainly a lot of the analysis around this meeting and surrounding this meeting has been that the primary objective will be to discuss some of these trade relationships, not necessarily that they're looking to reach any agreements at it, but that it's going to set the stage for the G7 Leaders Summit, June 15th to 17th.
Cheryl, I listened to that. I'm looking at the wires. Reuters is reporting that the head of the Bundesbank out of Germany is saying that he doesn't expect the G7 to split into G6, where you've got the 6 against the United States. But they're all sort of fighting the same battle, aren't they?
They are all sort of fighting the same battle, but at the same time, I think in what we've seen at previous, G7 ministers meetings is that nobody really wants to poke the bear. They all want to sit together in the same room and and be cordial and kind of come to some sort of agreement on whatever it is that the communique is. But they seem to get a lot more done when they do meet without the United States. So if you look back at the foreign ministers meeting, before, Liberation Day and, the tariffs went out worldwide, everybody was really, really hesitant to back Canada in any real way when they said, hey, you need to talk to the U.S. and stand up for us and stand up for Canada. Nobody wanted to do that.
They just wanted to,
they just wanted to wear red and white and maybe a pin and just do things really subtly. So no, it's not turning into the G6, but at the same time, that I don't think things are going to get as deep as they could in terms of how can we move forward. You have those pull asides, you have that, this and that, but nobody's really going to dive deep into say, hey, you're a guest in our house right now. And so Bassin's not going to raise too much of a stink. He'll leave that for Donald Trump. But everybody else is kind of going to play it a little safe.
There's also the question of concessions, though. What can Canada give to get something back? Peter MacKay was just talking about maybe that's where this Golden Dome idea comes in. That this is something we're already so deeply intertwined through NORAD already and maybe this isn't even a real thing. It's going to cost more money than anybody has. Tim, is there some concession element of that, do you think, in terms of why Canada is seemingly embracing this?
What do you mean it wasn't real? Those poster boards were awesome.
They were.
That were there. I mean,
as with the Space Force.
I thought it was the 1980s and it was Ronald Reagan and Star Wars, and you will well remember how that all unraveled. I think what's interesting here, you've talked to Peter, you've talked to others. I think a lot of this is already in place, right? I think there are 3 existing defense systems that the U.S. has that if they were blended together, you could argue do a lot of what the supposed Golden Dome will do. That already involve NORAD. So it's not a big step for Canada to say it will be part of it. So yeah, if you can show some willingness to just be there and be able to participate. What will it mean? I mean, I think it's the final figure I saw, or initial figure I saw, $243 billion. I don't know how much of that they expect from us.
It's going to be so much more than that.
I know. In 3 years, this is all going to be done because there's actual space component to it. Anyway, I think we take part in the discussion, see where this goes. As with Star Wars, this may unravel domestically in the U.S. as it proceeds.
But Cheryl, the whiplash of I was talking to people in the early stages of the 51st state stuff saying, cancel the F-35 contract and invest that all in drones that we can use to fight back an American invasion. And now all of a sudden we're talking about let's spend hundreds of billions of dollars building a new missile defense system that covers all of Fortress North America.
Yeah. Yes, but at the same time, you also can't necessarily take put a lot of stock in Donald Trump says Canada wants in and they're all ready to go.
But the PMO has said they want it.
PMO
They
has said that they are having discussions about a wide range of things about the security or defense relationship. That doesn't mean they're saying they're ready to write a check.
Fair.
So
Very fair.
so just because Donald Trump has said it, I would want to wait and see a little more. But at the same time, yes, you will have people who are going to be a little leery and a little weary because Prime Minister Mark Carney very clearly said, based on the old relationship with the U.S. is over. He said, let me quote, based on the deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation. He said that's over.
Yeah.
So to now say it's over, but we're going to really lean into this. Yeah, that's going to be a weird thing for people to balance in their minds. That's not to say we shouldn't have a seat at the table. If you're talking about Canadian sovereignty and all the rest, why would you want the U.S. to have complete control over this system?
And yet, Jordan, as Tim points out, we're so deeply intertwined in this stuff already. If there was to be a North American or even an American missile defense system, it would involve NORAD, which would, by definition, involve us.
Right. Well, and of course, Canada is already an integral part of NORAD, but we step out of the room when it comes to defensive questions often because of our position on missile defense. But look, there's a reason that this has been a political hot potato in Canada for 20 years. This is a flashback having this conversation going back to Paul Martin staying out of this in 2004 under George Bush. And I would make the argument that domestically in Canada, this will have become an even harder sell today because not only is it just sort of a little bit out there in terms of some of the technology and potentially unpalatable for Canadians, but we're talking about more deeply integrating our defense systems with a country that has just talked about annexing us.
Yes. By economic force, but by some force.
Or other force, you know, so does it make sense right now really to be going out and talking about deepening the integration with the United States on these core defense questions when those things remain unresolved? And I have to tell you, I think the consensus around town is correct, which is that D&D will be the last people to realize that our relationship with the United States has changed and that pursuing something like this at the moment, I think, is playing with fire for Prime Minister Carney.
Amanda, I want your take on this, but real quick, because I want to talk about what happened in the Oval Office today.
For sure. Well, I think there's a couple of things. I actually think that there could be more appetite for something like this. I think we have, we're in NORAD, and so we're dealing with, we have the ability to monitor the skies, but we can't, as Jordan has said, make any decisions around when a strike would be launched. The inability to do that, given what's happening globally, Canadians are looking around the world and they see these crises unfold, and we know that we have to increase our defense spend. We know that we should be more prepared. We also have our sensors in the Arctic, which are aging out. And so there's a big upgrade effort that has to come. But most importantly, we are in a trade negotiation in which this could be a chip in that negotiation. PMO, Canada has already signaled that could be the case.
Hey, don't forget, we did shoot down a Chinese weather balloon over the Yukon. We got that done.
We did do that.
Where was that?
Okay. The thing that I was obsessed with today was this meeting in the Oval Office, and it was such a reminder of how quickly things can go sideways when you're in a meeting with President Trump. We're watching it here. The president rolled out a television to play a video that they had put together with accusations of white genocide. They dimmed the lights in the Oval Office and played this basically kind of mini documentary with pretty widely debunked claims about the situation in South Africa. And I wonder, in looking at this and looking back at Mark Carney's meeting with the president, where we all sort of said, oh my gosh, anything can happen when you go into the Oval Office, how much of a bullet do we think Mark Carney dodged by having a normal, respectful, quiet meeting with President Trump?
I mean, a huge one. And you have to think that part of that is about perhaps some of the conversations that happened between President Trump and his aides before he went into that room to try to keep things on an even keel. I mean, look, I think part of it is down to those things and preparation, and I'm sure there's certainly Prime Minister Carney displayed his skill in those circumstances, but also a lot of it is luck. Trump is incredibly mercurial, and that's what we see when we see some of these moments, that unpredictability is just huge.
Right. Tim, how do you even prepare for a meeting like that?
Yeah, you cross every orifice you have and pray and just, and I think a lot of it is probably how you prepare Trump's team for all of that. I don't know what happened with the South Africans. I mean, there's so many racial overtones in this.
Yeah.
It's disgusting on multiple levels. It betrays a history also of not understanding South Africa. It's like, it shows a pronounced ignorance. Many of the things that come with Donald Trump. Yep, Mark Carney was very lucky. Not sure what the president is trying to achieve unless he's, somehow trying to lever himself among the minds of certain power brokers in South Africa that control rare minerals. I don't know what the hell he's doing.
Do we think, Terrell, I'll go to you. Do you think, how much of it is the prep of the teams and making sure that you know what's coming? Because the South African president looked completely ambushed by this. And how much of it is being able to just sit in the moment and say, this is what it is, and I'm going to ride it out? Because he didn't do what Zelensky did of try to fight back.
No, he didn't. He did, get his own quip in about, I don't have a plane for you, that sort of thing. So you can only do so much. I'm sure there is some level of preparation, but you also had to think he had to have known. You can't have given everything that's happened and the fact that the U.S. has just accepted these quote unquote refugees and from South Africa, and he can't. I think that speaks to maybe a failure of his own team if he was caught off guard, right. That they didn't do that necessary prep, because look at who you have in his ears, Elon Musk, and that is somebody who obviously has a very large stake in this.
If you live online as much of that administration does, it's all anybody's been talking about in certain corners of MAGA world.
Exactly, but speaking not even just living online, but Elon Musk being South African and
100%,
the rest of it, and having those connections. So that should have been a very clear sign, and I do think that all the groundwork that the Canadian team had done would have helped prepare the Mark Carney.
We're watching an empty dais here as we're waiting for Prime Minister Mark Carney to come out. He's expected any minute. When he does, we will go to it. But until then, Amanda, what is your sense of the meeting, its implications, and what we've learned about now a pretty high stakes roll of the dice whenever anybody shows up at the Oval Office?
Totally. Well, yeah, and listen, media prep 101 is prepare for the absolute worst. The worst question you could possibly be asked, the worst scenario. With Trump, that brings it down to a whole new low. And it's you can really see his reality TV background come into play. I see Carney getting to the podium, so you...
Oh, well, then there you go. Thank you. You did the throw for me. Here's Mark Carney speaking in honor.
First cabinet planning forum at Wilson House at Meech Lake. And while we were there, as a team, we sat down and we discussed how we can best deliver the major changes that are needed to overcome the many challenges that Canada currently faces. In a more dangerous and divided world, geopolitical risks are rising, threatening our sovereignty. The global trading system, which has helped power Canada's prosperity for decades, is undergoing its biggest transformation since the fall of the Berlin Wall. At home, our long-standing weak productivity is making life less affordable for Canadian families. It's straining government finances and threatening to undermine the sustainability of vital social programs on which Canadians rely. So Canada's new government has an immense responsibility to address these challenges head-on, with focus, new strategies, and determined execution. And that new approach animates the mandate letter that I shared with all members of our ministry at the end of our meeting. It reflects a unified mission. This one letter outlines the core priorities of Canada's new government, reflecting the mandate that Canadians have given to us. In particular, the government is charged to build the strongest economy in the G7, an economy that works for everyone. We're to bring down the cost of living for Canadian families, to keep our country secure and our communities safe, to develop a new economic and security relationship with the United States, and to build new partnerships with reliable allies around the world. Our team is already acting on this mandate with urgency and determination. This past weekend, I met with U.S. Vice President Vance in Rome, where I reiterated what workers and businesses on both sides of the border have long known, that Canada and the United States are stronger when we work together. Minister LeBlanc is currently in Washington to continue negotiations with members of President Trump's cabinet. And Minister Champagne is meeting with his American counterpart as the minister leads the G7 finance ministers meeting in Banff. Notre nouvelle équipe de ministres a été bâtie pour ce moment.
Was built for this critical time in this country's history, to bring about the changes that Canadians deserve. It was built to allow for real cabinet government so that each one has the ability and the responsibility to show leadership, to bring forward new ideas, and to act with determination.
The next few weeks and months will be crucial to catalyze the changes that Canadians deserve. This next Tuesday, May 27th, in the speech from the throne, His Majesty King Charles III will outline our government's plan to build Canada strong. On June 2nd, I will chair a major First Ministers meeting in Saskatoon to strengthen the partnerships that are needed to build one Canadian economy out of 13 and to catalyze the significant nation-building projects that will diversify and strengthen our economy. In the middle of June, I will host the G7 and other world leaders in Alberta to address global challenges ranging from energy security to the future of the new global commercial trading system. By Canada Day, our government intends to take action to eliminate all remaining federal barriers to internal trade. This fall, the Minister of Finance will deliver Budget 2025, a budget based on a clear fiscal outlook shaped by a higher degree of confidence in the prospective efficiencies and cost savings across government, greater clarity on the economic impacts of the trade war, and the commitments on new defense investments necessary to secure Canadian sovereignty and to meet our responsibilities to our allies, as will be agreed at the upcoming NATO summit towards the end of June. This budget will be guided by a new fiscal discipline, spending less on government operations so that Canadians can invest more to build a stronger economy. Government must become more productive by deploying AI at scale, by focusing on results over spending, and by using scarce tax dollars to catalyze multiples of private investment. As our workers are continuing to face unjustified tariffs imposed by the United States, my government is fighting to get the best deal for Canada. We will take all the time necessary, but not more, to do so. And in parallel, we are strengthening our relationships with reliable trading partners and allies. Canada has what the world needs and the values the world respects. To
strengthen our ties to partners and allies around the globe, I have multiplied the calls to them. In Rome last weekend, I spoke to a number of international leaders, including the Italian Prime Minister, Ms. Meloni, the German Chancellor, Mr. Metz, and the President of the European Commission, Ms. van der Leyen. In the coming weeks and months, I will seize every opportunity to speak to global leaders in order to create new opportunities for Canadian workers and businesses. And first and foremost, we must strengthen our own economy an economy that creates jobs, that increases wages, and that is resilient to shocks. We will build a single Canadian economy, not 13. We will identify and accelerate the completion of nation-building projects that will connect and transform our country.
We will always be guided by our conviction that our economy is only strong when it serves everyone. That means bringing down costs for Canadians and helping them to get ahead. We will put more money in Canadians' pockets with a middle-class tax cut that will take effect by Canada Day, saving two-income families up to $840 a year. We will unleash the power of public-private cooperation, catalyze the housing industry, and create hundreds of thousands of new careers in the skilled trades by building homes faster, at lower costs, and with smaller environmental footprint in construction and greater efficiency once families move in.
We will ensure the safety of Canada as a sovereign nation, as well as the safety of all Canadians within their communities. With the Canadian Armed Forces, the police, and a stronger border and criminal code, we will build confidence in our immigration system and bring back targets to a viable level and cap the number of foreign international students entering Canada, while at the same time attracting talented workers who will help us to build a strong economy.
In the mandate letter released today to Canada's ministry, I encouraged my colleagues that we can more than meet our challenges with energy and ambition. That is how Canadians have built the best country in the world, and that is how we will build it even better. It's time to build big, build bold, build now. Merci, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We're now going to begin with the question period. Nous allons commencer avec la période de questions. First question, Abigail.
Abigail Beeman, CTV News. Thank you for taking our questions. The American ambassador told CTV's Power Play today that pulling out of the F-35 deal would threaten NORAD. Do you agree, and do you have an update on the F-35 plans?
The second part of your question, the review of the F-35 contract is ongoing. There's many factors that come into that. Interoperability, so that would relate to the NORAD element there. Value for money, broader Canadian industrial impacts, all of those are factors that are under consideration. So it's, I didn't see the ambassador's specific comments, but those are factors that are part of an ongoing review of the contract.
The ambassador also said that there haven't been formal talks on the Golden Dome. Should Canada take part in that project, and how much would you be willing to spend on that?
Okay, well, I'm not going to put a price tag on the second part of your question. I think I'll say the following about the situation with air defense or ballistic missile defense, intercontinental ballistic missile defense, broader defense against, including potential missiles that in the not too distant future could come from space. I mean, these are some of the threats that our nation faces. We take those threats seriously. We take our responsibilities as a government seriously, as I just said. It's one of the reasons why we made the commitment back in March for the over-the-horizon radar, the first phase of the over-horizon radar system, and that was an independent decision that we took. We are conscious that we have an ability, if we so choose, to complete the Golden Dome with investments and partnership. And it's something that we are looking at and something that has been discussed at a high level, but I'm not sure one negotiates on this. These are military decisions that are then taken in that context. And we will evaluate it accordingly. Thank you.
Next question.
Ronnie McKenzie Gray with Global News. During the election, you were very public in saying that the old relationship that Canada has with the U.S. is over. You said that Donald Trump is trying to break us so he can own us. But now, just a couple weeks after the election, there's conversations, at least, about further integrating the Canadian military with the U.S. about the Golden Dome. What do you say to Canadians who voted for you based on your elbows up mentality with the Americans?
Well, first, one of the reasons why we're having more constructive discussions with the Americans is because we are demonstrating our ability that we have choices. We have choices economically. We have choices with respect to our defense. I'll give you several examples to back that up. Maybe I'll step away from the economics. Mr. Gray, you've probably heard enough of me on that, so I will talk about defense for a moment. With respect to the F-35, it was raised a moment ago, we have alternatives for the F-35 for the back end of that. European alternatives that we could pursue. We have to weigh them in the best interests of Canada. That's how we will evaluate it. With respect to broader defense, whether it's air, sea, land, cyber, we have other partnerships that we can strike. And one of the things, as you will have heard, but I'll repeat, that we have been discussing with our European partners is becoming a full partner of Rearm Europe, Safe Europe, different acronyms for a major relationship that we can have that gives us diversification, new partners, new options, better value for money, potentially more domestic Canadian economic benefits. So all of that exists in parallel to potential opportunities with the U.S. And the way I would characterize the change in the relationship, and I stood in this room and made those comments the first time, and I'm very clear, and I absolutely repeat them today, which is we had for almost half a century, we as Canada, a relationship with the Americans which were a steady process of deepening integration in economics. We went from free trade deal through to CUSMA, deepening integration in military aspects. And that process of deepening integration is over. We are in a position now where we cooperate when necessary, but not necessarily cooperate. So we have other options for that cooperation. We are pursuing those other options. You will see a very different set of partnerships, security and economic, going forward. But to be absolutely clear, when it is in Canada's interest, first best interest, to cooperate with the Americans, to strike deals with the Americans, relationships, and particularly in examples like ballistic missile defense, that may be the best option, and if so, we will pursue that.
On the point of further integration, you said on Sunday in Rome, it's prudent to diversify our defense partnerships when there are questions of sovereignty at issue. Why would we even want to have conversations about further integration militarily when you said just 4 days ago that the Americans have questions of our sovereignty?
I'm trying to recall the comments to which you're referring to.
Last question to Eric at the...
when
you were talking about the
forgive me, you can furnish me with the transcript, but there is, as we know, the President has expressed on multiple occasions a wish for, I'm not going to repeat the phrase, I never repeat the phrase, but a wish for something to happen. That is never going to happen. That is understood, increasingly understood. The wish still exists, but the reality is different. First point. Second point, there are cases where it is in our interest to be integrated with the U.S. market. The automobile sector. My entire life, our automobile sector has been integrated with the U.S. The Auto Pact was struck the year I was born. There are elements of our security relationship where it can make sense, but not all elements of our economic relationships or our security relationships does it make sense, and we are actively and aggressively pursuing alternatives.
Prochaine question. Radio.
Bonjour, Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada. J'aimerais vous entendre en français sur est-ce que vous pensez que c'est une bonne idée de participer du côté du Canada au Dôme
for Canada to be participating in the Golden Dome project? And he seems to have said that Canada has expressed interest in it. In terms of our discussions with the Americans on the Golden Dome, there have been discussions underway for several years now between military officials and security officials of both Canada and the United States. The President and I had a couple of discussions about the concept of the Golden Dome. Is it a good idea for Canada? Well, it's a good idea to have protection for Canadians and Canada in terms of a missile defense system. But the fact is that there are now threats coming from Russia, North Korea, and China. There are real threats against Canada. And we have a choice. Will we create protection for our cities and our country or not? And if we decide to do that, according to my government, that is necessary. So will it be Canada alone or Canada with the United States? Because with the Golden Dome, there will be decisions made that could have an impact on Canada. So there are a number of considerations at play, but these are discussions that are continuing. And when you talk about protecting Canada with the Golden Dome, are we talking more about missile detection or actually intercepting missiles? Well, let's be clear. We obviously have to be more proactive because, the idea, there's a missile out there and there's a warning to Canadians. You have 30 seconds. No, we have to take action, so we have to change the policy. You just mentioned threats against Canada, but you didn't mention the U.S. In January, you said that the United States or President Trump are threatening our country and Canadian workers. Is Mr. Trump a threat or not? Well, on January 31st and even in February and March and last week, I may have said that because there is an economic threat against Canada because of the trade war. And that trade war is continuing. We are currently in discussion with the United States in order to put an end to that war and arrive at peace. But we'll see. So for now, the U.S. threat continues to exist. It's an economic threat. You also said that President Trump is a transformative president, and you said there are both positive and negative transformations coming from him. What are the positive transformations? Well, for a few years now, the President has been clearer with respect to geopolitical competition from China, for example. So basically, he has changed the U.S. geostrategic policy, including that of the previous administration under President Biden. He is clearer about the risks that exist in a number of places around the world.
The question was about positive aspect of President Trump's transformation, and my example was, and I was starting from his first presidency, about clarity about geopolitical and economic competition from China. And I think we have seen that but that intensified through the Biden administration, the reaction to that. So he was right about that. There's been a reaction to that. That has changed aspects of the game, and there are other aspects like that.
Next question.
Wait.
Hi, Prime Minister Marina von Stackelberg with CBC News. Did you speak to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance this weekend about putting that statement out with the U.K. and France against Israel expanding its military operations in Gaza? And was the U.S. supportive of you releasing this statement?
I advised the Vice President that we probably were going to say something. I didn't ask. It was a one-way conversation. I advised the Vice President of that. J'ai mentionné
Yes, I mentioned to the Vice President that Canada, France, and the United Kingdom, I was there with the UK Foreign Minister for a few moments, as well as with the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK, and I mentioned that it was quite probable that that announcement would be made about Gaza. But it wasn't a conversation. I was just providing information to him.
So it wasn't a conversation, sorry, I switched language. It wasn't a conversation, I informed him it wasn't anything more than that.
Did he give you a reaction?
I just said it wasn't a conversation, so.
If Israel continues to deny aid and expand military operations in Gaza, part of what your statement was about, what concrete action will Canada take, and what kind of sanctions will it include?
Well, I very much, the purpose of the statement, the intention of the clear language is not just of ourselves, but of France, of the United Kingdom, many other countries, is that Israel ensures that adequate humanitarian aid gets to the population there, many of whom are on the brink of starvation. Well, j'ai compris la question.
Yes, I understood the question.
On va décider.
We will decide. But it's the Israeli government that now has to take action.
Good evening, Catherine Lévesque, National Post. I wanted to get your opinion on the Reform Act. You might have seen, but a few of your MPs say it's nothing against you, but they want to have the power to trigger a leadership review if things go south, maybe in a couple of years. Are you comfortable with this idea?
Is that a prediction, Catherine? I mean, what is it? A little confidence.
Are you comfortable with that idea so early in your mandate?
Well, I'll say the following, which is that the Reform Act, all parties in Parliament, all recognized parties in Parliament are bound by the Reform Act. It's the law of the land, and therefore there are these 4 votes consistent with the Reform Act that will take place. They'll take place at the first caucus meeting, which is Sunday. So. It's just.
That idea.
Well, I observe that this will happen. There'll be these votes.
And just really quickly, I wanted to get your reaction on the IDF who fired some shots at some Canadian diplomats. Does that change your stance on Israel? Should we impose sanctions?
Well, the Israeli ambassador has been summoned to Global Affairs to see the minister and explain. We expect a full investigation. We expect a immediate explanation of what happened. It's totally unacceptable. It's some of many things that are totally unacceptable that's going on in the region. C'est absolument pas acceptable.
Yes, it's absolutely unacceptable what occurred, and it's now up to the Israeli ambassador to provide us with an explanation, and the government has to explain how this could have happened. But this is another example of things that are not acceptable.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Conférence de presse. Thank you.